Explanatory Note Preamble Appendix 1 State and Minorities Part 2 For Ambedkar reading, kindly subscribe the channel Reading Ambedkar by Dr. Anju Gurawa. We are reading the second part of State and Minorities written by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. Preamble gives constitutional shape and form to the resolution on objective passed by Constituent Assembly on Wednesday, this 22nd January 1947. Article 1, Section 1, Clause 1 to 4. The admission of the 600 and odd Indian states into the Union raises many difficult questions. The most difficult of them is the one which related to their admission into the Union. Every Indian state is claiming to be sovereign state and is demanding to be admitted into the Union in its own right. The Indian state fall into different classes from the view of size, population, revenue and resources. It is obvious that every state admit into the Union as a state must have capacity to bear the burdens of modern administrations, to maintain peace within its own borders and to possess the sources necessary for the economic development of its people. Otherwise, United States of India is likely to be encumbered with a large number of weak states which, instead of being a help to the central government, will be a burden upon it. The Union government with such small and weak states and its units will never be able to pull its full weight in an emergency. It is therefore obvious that it would be a grave danger to the future state of India if every Indian state were admitted into the Union without any scrutiny of its capacity to bear the burden of modern administration and maintaining internal peace. To avoid this danger, the article proceeds to divide the Indian states into two classes: qualified Indian states and unqualified Indian states. It possesses that a list of qualified Indian states should be drawn up as a first step in the procedure to be followed for the admission of the Indian states into the Union. A qualified Indian state will be admitted into the Union on an application for admission and the fulfillment of the provisions of the Enabling Act which the Union legislature is authorized to pass for the purpose of requiring an appropriate form of internal government set up within the state, which will be in the consonance to the principles underlying the Constitution of United States of India. The territory in the occupation of the unqualified Indian state will be treated as the territory of the United States of India and will be recognized into state of suitable sizes by the United States of India. In the meantime, those who are rulers of territory shall continue to administer the territory under the supervisions of United States of India. The Act also declared that the Indian territory, whether in occupation of British India provinces or the of Indian states, is one and integral and will be so even though an Indian state has not entered into the Union. Clause 4 provides that once a state is admitted in the Union, its integrity shall be maintained and it shall not be liable to subdivision except in accordance with the provisions contained in the clause. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 1 and 2. Clause 1 permits the United States of India to incorporate states which are independent but which are on the border and which are desired to join the Union. Clause 2 enables the United States of India to acquire territory and to incorporate it or to treat as a separate territory. Article 3, Section 1. The inclusion of fundamental rights in the Constitution requires no justification. The necessity of fundamental rights is recognized in all constitutions, old and new. The fundamental rights included in Article are borrowed from the Constitution of various countries, particularly from those wherein conditions are more or less analogous to those existing in India. Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1. Rights are real only if they are accompanied by the remedies. It is no use giving rights if the aggrieved person has no legal remedy to which he can resort when his rights are invaded. Consequently, when the Constitution guarantees right, it also becomes necessary to make provisions to prevent the legislature and executive from overriding them. This function has been usually assigned to judiciary, and court has been made the special guardians of the rights guaranteed by the Constitution. The clause does no more than this. That clause proposed to give protection to the citizen against executive tyranny by investing the judiciary with certain power of inquisition against the abuse of authority by the executive. This power takes the form of issue of rights. The High Court in India possesses these powers under the Government of India and under their letters patent. These powers are, however, subject to two limitations. The first place, the powers given by the letters patent are available only to high courts in pendency town and not to all. Secondly, these powers are subject to laws made by the Indian legislature. Thirdly, the powers given by the Government of India Act 1935 are restricted and may provide insufficient for the protection of the aggrieved person. The clause achieved two objectives. One, to give the fullest power to judiciary to issue what under the English law are called prerogative rights, and to prevent the legislature from curtailing these powers in any manner whatsoever. It is difficult to accept that in the country like India, whereas most persons are commonly minded, those an authority will give equal treatment to those who do not belong to their community. Unequal treatment has been the inescapable fate of untouchables in India. The following extract from the proceedings of the Board of Revenue of the Government of Madras in 723 date 5th November 1892 illustrates the sort of unequal treatment which is met out to the scheduled caste by Hindu offers, says the report. 134. There are forms of oppression only hitherto hinted at which must at least curiously mention to punish disobedience of pariah, their master. A. Bring false case in village court or in the criminal courts. 2. B. Obtain an application from government wasted lands lying all round the pariahs so as to impound the pariah cattle or obstruct the way to their temple. C. Have Mirasi name fraudulently entered in the government account against the Paracheri. D. Pull down the huts and destroy the growth in the backyards. D. E. Deny occupancy right in immoral subtenancies. F. Forcibly cut the pariah's crop and being resisted chain, charge them with theft and writing. G. Under misrepresentation, get them to execute the document by which they are afterwards ruined. H. Cut off the flow of water from their fields. I. Without legal notice, have the property of subtenants attached for the landlord's arrears of revenue. 135. It will be said, there are civil and criminal courts of the redress of any of these injuries. There are the courts indeed, but India does not breed village hemp dens. One must have courage to go to the court, money to employ legal knowledge and meet legal expenses, and means to live during the case and appeal. Further, most cases depend upon the decision of the first court, and the courts are presided over by officials who are sometimes corrupt and who generally, for the other reasons, sympathize with the wealthy and landed classes to which they belong. 136. The influence of these class with the official would call hardly be exaggerated. It is extreme with the natives and great even the Europeans. Every office from the highest to the lowest is stocked with their representatives, and there is no proposal affected their interest, but they can bring a score of influence to bear upon its course from inception into execution. The Punjab Land Alienation Act is another illustration of unequal treatment of untouchables by the legislature. Many other minority communities may be suffered from similar treatment at the hands of majority community. It is therefore necessary to have such a provision to ensure that all citizens shall have equal benefit of law, rules and regulations. The provisions of Class 1 are borrowed from Civil Rights Protection Act 1866 and March 1, 1875 passed by the Congress of United States of America to protect Negroes against unequal treatments. Clause 3. Discrimination is another menace which must be guarded against if fundamental rights are to be real rights. Indians, where it is possible for discrimination to be practiced on a vast scale and in a relentless manner, fundamental rights can have no meaning. The remedies follow the lines adopted in the bill which are recently introduced in the Congress of USA in the aim of which to prevent discrimination being practiced against the Negroes. The main purpose behind the clause is to put an obligation on the state to plan the economic life of people on lines which would lead to highest point of productivity without closing every avenue to private enterprise, and also provide for the equitable distribution of wealth. The plan set out in the clause opposes state ownership in agriculture with the collective wise method of cultivation and modified from the state socialism in the field of industry. It places squarely on the shoulders of the state the obligation to supply capital necessary for the agriculture as well as industry. Without the supply of capital by the state, neither land nor industry can be made to yield better results. It is also proposed to nationalize insurance with the double objective. Nationalized insurance gives the individual greater security than a private insurance firm does, in as much as it pledges the resources of the state as a security for the ultimate payments of the insurance money. It also gives the state the resources necessary for financing its economic planning, in the absence of which it would have to resort borrowing from the money market at a high rate of interest. State socialism is essential for the rapid industrialization of the Indian. Private enterprise can't do it, and if it did, it would produce those inequalities of wealth which private capitalism has produced in Europe, which should be a warning to Indians. Consolidation of holdings and tenancy legislation are worse than useless. They cannot bring about prosperity in agriculture. Neither consolidation nor tenancy legislation can be of any help to the 60 millions of untouchables who are just landless laborers. Neither consolidation nor tenancy legislation can solve their problem. Only collective firms on the lines set out in the proposal can help them. There is no dispose of the matters. One more question remains to answer: to whom and from whom it is this liberty? Obviously, this liberty is liberty to the landless to increase rents, for capitalists to increase hours of work and reduce rate of wages. This must be so. It cannot be otherwise, for in an economic system employing armies of workers producing goods and masses at regular intervals, someone must make rules so that workers will work and wheels of industry run off. If the state does not do it, private employees will. Life otherwise will become impossible. In other words, what is called liberty from the control of the state is another name for the dictatorship of the private employees. How to prevent such a thing happening? How to protect the unemployment as well as employed from being cheated out of their fundamental rights to life, liberty, pursuit of happiness? So this is also here what we see in the article of Enfranchisement of Women, written by Harriet Taylor Mill, Life, Liberty and Pursuit of Happiness. The useful remedy adopted by democratic countries is to limit the power of government to impose arbitrary restriction in political domain and invoke the ordinary power of legislature to restrain the more powerful individual from imposing arbitrary restraint on the less powerful in economic field. The inadequacy, maybe futility for the plan has been well established. The successful invocation by the less powerful authority of the legislature is a doubtful proposition. So I repeat, how to prevent such a thing happening, how to protect the unemployed as well as employed from being cheated out of their fundamental rights to life, liberty and pursuit of happiness. The useful remedy adopted by democratic countries is to limit the power of government to impose arbitrary restraints in political domain and to invoke the ordinary power of legislature to restrain the more powerful individuals from imposing arbitrary restraint on the less powerful in economic field. The inadequacy may be futility of the plan has been well established. The successful invocation by the less powerful of authority or legislature is a doubtful proposition, having regarded to the fact that even under adult suffrage, all legislature and government are controlled by the more powerful. An appeal to the legislature to intervene is a very precarious safeguard against the invasion of liberty of the less powerful. The plan followed quite different method. It seeks to limit not only the power of government to impose arbitrary restraint but also the more powerful individuals, or to be more precise, to eliminate the possibility of the more powerful having the power to impose arbitrary restraint on the less powerful by withdrawing from the control he has over the economic life of people. There cannot be slightest doubt that the two remedies against the invasion by the more powerful or the right and liberties of the less powerful, the other contains in the proposal is undoubtedly the more effective. Considered in the light of these observations, the proposal is essentially a proposal for safeguarding the liberty and of the individual. No constitutional layer can therefore object it to the guard that it does beyond the usual scope of constitutional law. So far as plan has been considered purely as a means of safeguarding individual liberty, but there is also another aspect of the plan which is worthy of the note. If it is attempted to establish state socialism without abrogating parliamentary democracy and without leaving it established to will of a parliamentary democracy, critics of state socialism, even its friends, are bound to ask, why make it part of constitutional law of the land? Why not leave it to the legislature to bring it into being by the ordinary process of law? The reason why it cannot left to the ordinary law is not difficult to understand. One essential condition for the success of a planned economy is that it must not be liable to the suspension or abandonment. It must be permanent. The question is how this permanent can be secured. Obviously, it cannot be secured under the form of government called parliamentary democracy. Under the system of parliamentary democracy, the policy of legislature and of the executive is the policy of the majority of the time being. Under the system of the parliamentary democracy, the majority in one election may be in favor of state socialism in industry and agriculture. At the next election, the majority may be against it. The anti-state socialism majority will use its law-making power to undoing the work of the pro-state socialism majority, and pro-state socialism majority will use its law-making power to doing over again what has done by their opponents. Those who want the economic structure of society to be modeled on state socialism realize that they cannot leave the fulfillment of so fundamental a purpose of to the exigencies exigencies of ordinary law, which simple majority whose political fortunes are never determined by rational clause have a right to make the unmake, have a right to make and unmake, have a right to make and unmake. For those reasons, political democracy seems to be unsuited for the purpose. What is the alternative? The alternative is dictatorship. There is no doubt that the dictatorship can give the permanence which state socialism requires as an essential condition of its fructification. There is, however, one fact against dictatorship which must be faced. Those who believe in individual freedom strongly object to dictatorship and insist upon parliamentary democracy as a proper form of government of a free society, for they feel that freedom of the individual is possible only under parliamentary democracy. Consequently, those who want freedom are not prepared to give up parliamentary democracy as a form of government. However much they may be anxious to have state socialism, they will not be ready to exchange parliamentary democracy for dictatorship, even though the gain by such an exchange is the achievement of the state socialism. The problem therefore is to have state socialism without dictatorship, to have state socialism with parliamentary democracy. The way out seems to be to retain parliamentary democracy and prescribe state socialism by the law of the constitution. So this will be beyond the reach of the parliamentary majority to suspend, amend or abrogate. It is only in this that one can achieve the triple object, namely to establish socialism, retain parliamentary democracy, avoid dictatorship. The proposal marks a departure from the existing constitution, whose aim is merely to prescribe the form of political structure of society, leaving the economic structure untouched. The result is that the political structure is completely set at naught by the force which emerged from economic structure, which is at variance with the political structure. Those who want socialism with parliamentary democracy and without dictatorship should welcome the proposal. The soul of democracy is doctrine of one man, one value. Unfortunately, democracy has attempted to give effect to this doctrine only so far as political structure is concerned by adopting the rule of one man, one vote, which is supposed to translate into fact and doctrine of one man, one value. It has left the economic structure to take the shape given to it those who are in position to mold. This has happened because constitutional lawyers have been dominated by the antiquated conception that all that is necessary for perfect constitutional democracy was to frame a constitutional law which would make government responsible to the proposal and to prevent tyranny of the people by the government. Consequently, almost all laws of constitution which relate to countries which are called democratic stop adult suffrage and fundamental rights, they have never advanced to conception that the constitutional law of democracy must go beyond adult suffrage and fundamental rights. In other words, all-time constitutional lawyers believe that scope and function of constitutional law was to prescribe the shape and form of political structure of society. They never realized that it is equally essential to prescribe the shape and form of economic structure of society. If democracy is to live up to its principle of its one man, one value. Time has come to take a bold step and define both the economic structure as well as the political structure of society by the law of the constitution. All countries like India, which are latecomers in the field of constitution making, should not copy the faults of the other countries. They should profit by the experience of their own predecessors. Article 3, Section 3, Clause 1. In the Government of India Act 1919 and 1935, the model was adopted of framing the structure of the executive in province and in the centre was of the British type, or what is called constitutional layers parliamentary executive, as opposed to American type of executive, which in contradiction of the British type is called non-parliamentary executive. The question whether the pattern and executive adopted in the two acts should be retained or whether it should be abandoned, and if so, model should be adopted in its place. Before giving final opinion on its issue, it would be desirable to set out the special feature of the British type of executive and consequences that are likely to follow it with an appeal to India. The following may be taken two special features of British or the parliamentary executive. 1. It gives a party which has secured a majority in the legislature the right to form a government. 2. It gives the majority party the right to exclude from government persons who do not belong to the party. 3. The government so formed continues in office only so long as it can command a majority in the legislature. If it ceases to command the majority, it is bound to resign either in favor of the government formed out of the executive legislature or in favor of new government formed out of new elective legislature. As to consequence that would follow if British system was applied in India, the situation can be summed up in following proposition. 1. The British system of government by a cabinet of the majority party rests on the premise that the majority of a political majority. In India, the majority is communal majority. No matter what social and political program it may have, the majority will retain its character of being communal majority. Nothing can alter this fact. Given this fact, it is clear that if British system was copied, it would result in Parliament permanently vesting executive power in communal majority. 2. British system government imposes no obligation upon the majority party to include in its cabinet the representatives of the minority party. If applied to Indian, consequences will be obvious. It would make the majority community a governing class and minority community a subject race. It would mean that the communal majority will be free to run the administrations according to its own idea and what is good for the minorities. Such a state of affair could be called democracy. It will have to be called imperialism. In the light of these consequences, it is obvious that the introduction of the British type of executive will be full of menace to the life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. The minorities in the general and the untouchable in particular. The problem of the untouchable is a formidable one for the untouchables to face. Untouchables are surrounded by the vast mass of Hindu population which is hostile to them and which is not ashamed of committing any inequity or atrocity against them. For a redress of these wrongs, which are matters of daily occurrence, the untouchables have to call it in aid of the administration. What is character and composition of the administration? To be brief, the administration in India is completely in the hands of Hindus. It is their monopoly. From top to bottom, it is controlled by them. There is no department which is not dominated by them. They dominate the police, magistracy and revenue service. Indeed, any and every brand of the administration. The next point to remember is that the Hindus in the administration have the same positive, anti-social and inimical attitude to the untouchables which the Hindus outside the administration have. Their own aim is to discriminate against the untouchables and to deny and deprive them not only of the benefits of law but also of the protection of the law against tyranny and oppression. The result is that the untouchables are placed objectionable in the proposed that a person should not be qualified to become a minister merely because he is elected to the legislature. The principle that a member of the legislature before he is made a minister should be chosen by their constituent was fully recognized by the British Constitution for over 100 years. A member of parliament who was appointed a minister had to submit himself for election before taking up his appointment. It was only lately given up. There ought before to be no objection to it, the ground that proposals are not compatible with the responsible government. The actual proposal in improved edition of the American form of government. And for the reason that under its member of the executive can sit in legislature and have a right to speak and answer question. Clause 2. The proposal cannot be controversial. The best remedy against tyranny and oppression of the majority against the minorities is inquiry, publicity and discussion. This is what safeguard provided for. A similar proposal was recommended by the Sapru Committee. Clause 3. Social boycott is always held over the heads of untouchables by the clause Hindus as a sword of domiciles. Only the untouchables know what a terrible weapon it is in the hands of Hindus. It affects and form as well as described in the report made by the committee appointed by the government of Bombay in 1928 to investigate the governance of the grievances of the depressed classes and from which the followed extract are made. It eliminates the situation in manner to so simple that everybody can understand and tyranny of the Hindus are able to practice upon the untouchables, the committee said. Although we have recommended various remedies to secure the depressed classes the right to all public utilities, we fear that there will be difficulties in way of their exercising them for long time to come. The first difficulty is fear of open violence against them by the orthodox classes. It must be noted that the depressed class form a small minority in every village, opposed to which is a great majority of the orthodox who are bent on protecting their interest and dignity from a supposed invasion by the depressed classes at any cost. The danger of prosecution by the police has put limitations upon the use of violence by the orthodox classes, and consequently such cases are rare. The second difficulty rises from economic position in which the depressed classes are found today. The depressed classes have no economic dependency in the most part of the presidency. Some cultivate the lands of orthodox class in their tenants at will. Others leave their earnings and far laborers employed by the orthodox classes and rest consist on the food gain given to them by the orthodox classes in lieu of service rendered to them as village servants. We have heard the numerous instances where the orthodox classes have used their economic power as a weapon against those depressed classes in their villages. When the latter have dared to exercise their rights and have evicted them from their land and stopped their employment and discontinue their remunerations as well as servants. This boycott is often planned on such an extensive scale as to include the prevention of depressed class from the using economic commonly used path and stoppage of the sale of necessary of life by the village mania. According to the evidence, sometimes small causes suffice for the proclamations of the social boycott against depressed classes. Frequently it followed on exercise by the depressed classes of their rights to use the commonwealth, but causes have been no means rare where a strange boycott has been proclaimed simple because depressed classes has put on this sacred thread, has brought a piece of land, has put on good clothes or ornament, or has carried a marriage procession with the bridegroom on the horse through the public street. This was said in 1928. Lest it should be regarded as a phase which has now ended, I reproduce below the copy of the petition by the untouchables of the village Kheri Jesore in the Punjab, addressed to the Deputy Commissioner of the Rohtak district in February 1947, a copy of which was sent to me. It reads as follows: from the scheduled caste people, Chamar, village Kheri Jesore Tehsil and district Rohtak, to the Deputy Commissioner, Rohtak district, Rohtak. Sir, we following scheduled caste, Chamars of the village Kheri Jesore, beg to invite your kind attention to the hard plight we put to due to undue pressure and merciless treatment by the caste Hindu Jats of this village. It was about 4 months back that Jats of the village assembled in the Chopal and told us to work in field on a wage in kind of one bundle of crop containing only about 1 seed of grains per day per month instead of food at both times and load of crops and annas 18 addition which we used to get before above announcement was made. As it was too little and insufficient to meet both ends, we refused to go to work. At this they were enraged and declared a social boycott on us. They made a rule that our cattle would not allow to gaze in the jungle unless we would agree to pay tax not levied under government of animal, which they call the Punchi. They even do not allow our cattle to drink water in the village pool and have prevented the sweepers from cleaning the street where we live, so that heaps of dust and dirt are lying there, which may cause some disease if left unattended. We are forced to lead a shameful life, and they are always ready to beat us, to tear down our honor by having indecent towards our wives, sisters, daughters. We are experiencing a lot of trouble of the worst type. While going to school, children were even beaten severely and in merciless manner. We submitted an application detailing the above facts to yourself, but we are sorry that no action has taken as yet. It is also your kind consideration that the inspector of the police, Tehsildar of Rohtak, who we approach in this connection, made a careless investigation, and in our opinion, no attention was paid to redress the difficulties of the poor and innocent persons. We therefore request our good self to consider our matter and make some arrangement to stop the merciless treatment and threats with the jars given us in different ways. We have no other approach except knock at your door and hope your honor will take immediate steps to enable us to lead the honorable and peaceful life which is humanity's birthright. We beg to remain, sir, your most obedient servant, scheduled caste people, Chamars of the village Kheri, Jesora, Tehsil and district Rohtak. Thumbs impression. Copy forwarded to the Honorable Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, Western Court, New Delhi. Received on 1st February 1947. This shows that what was true in 1928 is true even today. What is true of Bombay is true of whole India. For evidence of the general use of boycott by the Hindu against untouchables, one has only to refer the events that occurred all over India in the last elections to the provincial legislatures. Only when boycott is made criminal will be untouchables be free from being the slaves of Hindus. The weapons of boycott is nowadays used against the community bodies besides the scheduled caste. It is therefore in the interest of all minor communities to have their protection. The provision relating to boycott are taken bodily from Burma Anti-Boycott Act 1922.